13, just 4 chapters tonight. And we're going to skip a lot of these names, which you know our style, if you've been here on Sunday nights, how we do that. And I think we have liberty to do that because it would be quite monotonous. Plus, half these names I can't even pronounce. You know, it would be like Joe and Sam. I think I could do that. But in chapter 10, let's just jump right into it. Now, those who place their seal on the document. Now, what document? Well, it means we have to go retro a little bit with last week. They had just made a covenant to the Lord. They've confessed their sins. As post-exilic Jews coming back from exile to rebuild the temple, they have confessed their sins to the Lord through Nehemiah's prayer in chapter 9. And in chapter 9, verse 38, it says, we make a sure covenant and write it. Our leaders, our Levites, and our priests seal it. And so chapter 10 goes right into that. Those who placed their seal on the document were, and Nehemiah, the governor. And he was not a priest like Ezra was. He was more of a, I hate to say political leader, but it's kind of like what he was. He was the governor. And notice how he's first. And leaders are always supposed to be first, to set that example to follow. Boy, we need strong leaders today, don't we? Nehemiah is the man. He is. You'll see this guy here in these 4 chapters. He just steps forward in those shoes of authority. You know, if God makes you a leader, he gives you shoes to wear for it. And you just got to step in them and walk forward. And sometimes it's tough. That's why a lot of people don't like to be leaders. I don't want to be a leader. I don't want all that responsibility. I don't want people bagging on me and disagreeing with me, and I've got to set people straight. And I never want to be a supervisor or anything like that, man. Just give me a chill job. But for some people, they're called to be leaders. And Nehemiah was one of those, that's for sure, and such a good one. So, look at all these guys. May I skip these names? Of course, chapter 6 says Daniel. So we have a Daniel in the house tonight. I think he would like that. So I just had to point that out. But the end of verse 8, it says these were the priests. And then verse 9, it says the Levites. And then those were the assisting priests to the sons of Aaron, the priests in general. And then verse 10, their brethren. Then verse 14, it says the leaders of the people. And it mentions all these guys all the way down through 27. And so verse 28, it says, now the rest of the people. And, you know, it's just like us, isn't it? Most of us are just the rest of the people. You know? And we know we're just that way. We're not anything special, but we're special to the Lord, aren't we? You know? We're the rest of the people. It's so funny how the world says, oh, yeah, you're either here or you're down here. But most of us are just the rest of the people. And that's good enough for me. I feel that way. I'm just the rest of the people. And the Lord, though, sees that. And he thinks everybody's special. You know what God likes to do? This is how man does it. It's like, you're on the top here. You know, these are the top people. We're like down here. You know what God does? He goes like this. That's what he likes. See that? He takes the proud, brings them down, and the meek, he exalts. So if you've always felt like an ordinary person, yeah, I'm just the rest of the people. You know, my names aren't in here. Most people's names aren't in here. We're the rest of the people. But God sees everyone individually, doesn't he? When we look at big crowds, we say, oh, what a big crowd. It's going to take forever. Get through this crowd. But God sees individuals. And he loves to take the unsung heroes and he loves to trumpet their cause. When no one else sees what they're doing, God sees it. I love it. And then at the end of verse, or middle of 28, and all those who had separated themselves from the peoples of the lands to the law of God. And I like that. When an individual says, you know what? I want the Bible in my life. I want to read it. I want to study it. And I'm going to separate myself from the peoples to study the law of God. Because obviously, our society isn't really following God, is it? For the most part, it's not following the Lord. But we follow the Lord. We follow the law of God. That's why we study it. In verse 29, these joined with their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and an oath to walk in God's laws. And this goes back to Deuteronomy 29. Basically what it is if I walk with the Lord, I'm going to get his blessing. If I don't, then it's going to be like a curse upon me, as I go contrary to the word. And that's Deuteronomy chapter 28 and 29. It records the blessings and the curses. When you line up with God's program, what's going to happen to your life? Blessing. When you go contrary to the Lord, does it go good? Never goes good. I mean, maybe initially, but then we bomb out. Thank God for the bombing out times, because that's what brings you back to the Lord. That's what brought me to the Lord. I was bombing out in my life. I had to hit bottom. And then, praise God, the Lord turned my life around. Now, verse 30 says that we would not give our daughters as wives to the peoples of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. And that was always a temptation, is to be unequally yoked together with the non-believers. And that's our goal. I mean, that's my goal for my daughters, is that they would be spiritually yoked together with men who love the Lord. And I got one for two now, because my daughter Lindsay married a godly man. But, I mean, there were times it was like, oh no, not this guy. Please, Lord, please, Lindsay, what are you doing, And then, praise God. Guy would go away. We would say bye-bye. And then she's with Jonas now. Only problem is she lives 9 hours ahead in Sweden. But you know what? I'll take that, because she married a godly guy. And then he took her away. Far away land. But they're walking with Jesus. Now my other daughter, okay, she's 21. And you know what? She's looking for that in her life. I don't think I have to worry too much about that. Verse 31, if the peoples of the land brought wares or any grain to sell on the Sabbath day, we would not buy it from them on the Sabbath or on a holy day, and we would forego the seventh year's produce and the exacting of every debt. These things were recorded in the law of God. So they're getting back to the Bible, in other words. Just always getting back to the Bible. It's what we need. It's what our country needs. Let's go back to the Bible. Also, we made ordinances for ourselves to exact from ourselves yearly 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our God. And that was in God's law as well. It was just that temple tax, so to speak, once a year for the showbread, for the regular grain offering, for the regular burnt offering of the Sabbaths, the new moons, and the set feasts, for the holy things, for the sin offerings, to make atonement for Israel, and all the work of the house of our God. We cast lots among the priests, the Levites, and the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our God. Because you figure these sacrifices are going up continually, and what's the fuel that they used? It was wood. So they had a rotation basis where like your family would bring in the wood one week, and your family would bring in the wood another week. It was kind of a cool thing, We're bringing in the wood for the offering, for the sacrifices. So God's people are coming together here. according to our fathers' houses at the appointed times year by year, to burn on the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law. And we made ordinances to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all fruit of all trees year by year to the house of the Lord. So this sets the stage for New Testament giving, tithing, where, we just give our first fruits to the Lord. In the old days, the Old Testament days, they would just, the first fruit, literally fruit, right? They would bring to the Lord the first of their lambs, the first of their oxen, whatever produce that they had, their grapes or whatever, that they would just give to the Lord. And so now we give the first fruits to the Lord in tithes and offerings. And it's a joy to give because it's the Lord's, isn't it? It's not like, I have to give. When Cheryl and I give those tithes and offerings, it's the first bill, you guys. I'm the bill payer in our house, okay? So, you just think about everything you have to pay for, gas, electricity, your cell phone bill, and groceries, and this and that, and it's like, oh man, it's my whole paycheck, So what we do, there's that tendency to like to spend it all and not have anything left for the Lord. So we take the first fruits. First thing we do, the first bill we pay. It's like, there it is. There's that tithe to the Lord. And then I just know that, okay, I've done this by faith, and God's going to meet our every need as a family until the next time I get paid, see? And it's such a blessing. We think about, we might run out of money. Well, I'd rather run out of money on something else than the Lord. Come on, God deserves our best. And so there's an Old Testament precedent here of giving the first fruits, and we go into the New Testament, and the principle is the same. To bring, verse 36, the firstborn of our sons and our cattle, as it is written in the law, and the firstborn of our herds and our flocks to the house of our God, to the priests who minister in the house of our God. To bring the first fruits of our dough, our offerings, the fruit from all kinds of trees, the new wine and oil, to the priests, to the storerooms of the house of our God, and to bring the tithes of our land to the Levites, for the Levites should receive the tithes in all our farming communities. So with that there, I kind of see that whatever source of income, like wherever it comes from, if you have a job and like a side job, or some of the girls selling things on Etsy, or whatever online, whatever comes in, see, just tithe that. Whatever source. It's like, what, the Lord gets his first portion, and, that's good. And the priest, the descendant of Aaron, shall be with the Levites when the Levites receive tithes, and the Levites shall bring up 1/10 of the tithes to the house of our God, to the rooms of the storehouse. So I like this here, because sometimes people have asked, do pastors tithe? Or, do other people in the ministry tithe? Of course we tithe. Yeah, we're Christians too, We're Christians before we're pastors or musicians or whatever, evangelists. And what a joy. Of course we tithe. And we want to tithe. We love the Lord. For the children of Israel and the children of Levi shall bring the offering of the grain, of the new wine, and the oil to the storerooms where the articles of the sanctuary are, where the priests who minister and the gatekeepers and the singers are, and we will not neglect the house of our God. I like that. We're not going to neglect the house of our God. We're not going to let it, run down because we're just so busy trying to provide for our own needs. And there's a book called Haggai that we'll get to eventually that talks about that. The people of God were leaving the house of God and just concentrating on their own homes. And they weren't tithing. And the house of the Lord was becoming decrepit. And the prophet spoke and said, you guys got panel houses and all? You're out there at Lowe's and Home Depot, so to speak, And you got your granite countertops and all these things that you're doing, remodeling your house. Then you go to the house of the Lord, man. It's all falling apart. That's what the prophet said. So he put them back in line. And I like this here. We will not neglect the house of our God. There's another way I see this, not just financially, but I see it as in Hebrews 10, 24, and 25. So let's bookmark it here. Put a finger here in Nehemiah and go over to the New Testament book of Hebrews. Hebrews 10, 24, and 25. Hebrews 10, 24. Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. So that's what we do to one another. We stir each other up. We inspire each other. And that's a cool thing. That's why it's important to be around other believers. Now, verse 25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as we see the day approaching. See, that goes back to Nehemiah 10:39. We will not neglect the house of our God. By what? Our attendance. Our attendance. Christians go truant, don't they? Just like when we used to ditch when we were kids. We'd go to the beach or whatever. It's like God's kids do that. And it says it right here. Some people develop bad habits by not going to church. So let's read it again. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some. Now, we can develop bad habits, right? We can pick our noses. We can bite our fingernails. We could do whatever. But it says that some believers, even back in New Testament days here, way back 2,000 years ago, Christians still had a tendency to just not go to church. So we know that it's hard sometimes. You get tired and you're sick and different things happen, and there's some legit reasons. But for the most part, not developing that bad habit, but exhorting one another. So we have to be around each other to do that. And look at this, so much the more as you see the day approaching. So true revival is not like knocking off church, but adding on, isn't it? That's when revival's going on in your heart and in your life. See, when we start not going, you know what that is? Coldness will settle in. But when you get on fire for the Lord, it's like you can't get enough. And I want to be there. I don't have to be there. I want to be there. Did you want to be here tonight? I know you did, because you're here. I was excited about coming tonight. It was just so cool. I couldn't wait to be here. And Sundays are busy for me, obviously. 3 services on Sunday morning, and I was so hungry after church, man. I'll eat an elephant. It doesn't matter, it's really cool. We had these gift cards from Applebee's, and we got ribs this afternoon. Dude, it was good. Baby back ribs with a little honey, barbecue sauce on it. It was so good. And I about ate the plate, too. I was just so hungry. It's like, the Lord provided. I still had those Christmas, little gift. Those are the best things, man. Just love those things. I love to give them, and I love to receive them. No, I'm not begging. No, I was just talking about the ones I already got. And, and here I am back tonight. It's just been such a fantastic day. So much the more as you see the day approaching. Because Satan will pick us off. The wolf, when he looks at the sheep, who does he pick off? The stragglers. The ones kind of walking off, not being in the center. And these are the last days. And if anything, we got to just plunge in and go in. It's like more, not less, more. I need more of this. The more, the better. So let's go back to Nehemiah. And then we're now in chapter 11, verse 1. Now the leaders of the people dwelled at Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to dwell in Jerusalem, the holy city, and 9/10 were to dwell in other cities or out in the suburbs. So, why wouldn't you want to live in Jerusalem? Because it was full of rubble. It had been neglected for many years. Now, the city proper was rebuilt, the temple was rebuilt, and the walls were rebuilt. But it needed to be populated more. It's the city of the great king. So they now had lots. They chose 1 out of 10 to come into the city. And that would be a big thing, giving up your home and moving into the inner city. See? And the people blessed all the men who willingly offered themselves to dwell at Jerusalem. So instead of being part of the lottery, which that played out, but they really blessed the people that said, you know what, we'll do it. We'll do it. You know, we're going to move out of this city, the suburb. It's real chill out there. We love it out there. We've built up our home. We love it. It's just a great community, but we're going to go into Jerusalem. I mean, come on. This is the city of the great king. These are the heads of the province who dwelt in Jerusalem. But in the cities of Judah, everyone dwelt in his own possession in their cities. Israelites, priests, Levites, Nethinim, or servants, temple servants, and descendants of Solomon's servants. Also in Jerusalem dwelt some of the children of Judah and of the children of Benjamin. And the children of Judah are these, and they are enumerated there, name by name. And then verse 7, these are the sons of Benjamin, and it names them. And verse 10, of the priests. Verse 12, their brethren who did the work of the house were 822. And just goes on and talks about some of these families and how many there were from that particular family and the greater clan of that family. 14, and their brethren, mighty men of valor, were 128. Men of valor are men of character, men who would lay down their lives for valor, for the right thing. Verse 15, also of the Levites, it mentions them. And then 17, Mattaniah was the son of Asaph, the leader who began the thanksgiving with prayer. So he was a worship leader, but he opened up in prayer. You know, and it goes together, doesn't it? Music, worship, and prayer. Verse 18, all the Levites in the holy city were 284. 19, moreover, the gatekeepers, these were the guys busy with all the gates, opening, closing. Guys are practical in their service. So often I think of our ushers at our church as gatekeepers. And the rest of Israel, of the priests and Levites, were in all the cities of Judah, and everyone in his inheritance. But the Nethinim, the temple servants, dwelt in Ophel. 22, also the overseer of the Levites at Jerusalem was Uzai. And it says, it drops down, of the sons of Asaph, the singers in charge of the service of the house of God, for it was the king's command, verse 23, concerning them, that a certain portion should be for the singers, a quota day by day. That would have been a cool job back then. What do you do for a living? Oh, I worship the Lord at the temple, and get paid for it. So there's Pethaniah, verse 24, the king's deputy in all matters concerning the people. And as for the villages with their fields, some of the children of Judah dwelt in Kirjath Arba and its villages. And of 30, they dwelt from Beersheba to the valley of Hinnom. Verse 32, it says Anathoth, that was where Jeremiah was from, a priestly city a few miles north of Jerusalem. So that's just kind of a summary. We drop down into chapter 12. We're going to do more of this. Now these are the priests and the Levites who came up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Joshua, that was the high priest. So this is an old list, and this was many, many years ago. And so it mentions all these guys. Verse 8, moreover, the Levites were, and they led the Thanksgiving Psalms. And as we study Psalms, we see those Thanksgiving Psalms. There's many of them in the book of Psalms. Now in the days, verse 12, of Joiakim, the priest, the heads of the fathers' houses were, and it mentions these guys. Verse 13 says Ezra, but we don't know if that was another Ezra. Probably more than likely because of so many years were distant between the two from this first list. Verse 22, during the reign of Darius the Persian, a record was also kept of the Levites and priests who had been heads of their fathers' houses in the days of Eliashib. 23, the sons of Levi, the heads of the fathers' houses until the days of Johanan, the son of Eliashib, were written in the book of the Chronicles. And the heads of the Levites were, and it mentions them in the middle, to praise and give thanks, group alternating with group, according to the command of David, the man of God. So that really blessed me, because that's what we do at Calvary Chapel Norco. You never get the same worship leader twice. Well, you kind of do on Sunday nights, huh? Me, sorry. But rest of the time on Thursdays and Sunday mornings, we alternate. You know, we used to have a praise band, and it was cool. We loved it, and it kind of really grew, and it kind of shrank a little bit, and all. But then, you know, for certain reasons, it's no more. We thought, well, what do we do now? You know, do we form another praise band? But we saw so many musicians in the church, and you know what it was? It was an opportunity for them to come forward and use their talents. And at first it was like, oh, they're good, but, you know, we were all kind of thinking, we miss the praise band. We like the rhythm, boom, boom, have a bass, you know, and the djembe over there, boom, no, not like that, but, you know, you kind of miss that, you know, the whole rhythm thing, you know, like other churches and what we used to have. But we kind of got into this. The rotation was like, wow, she's good. He's good. They're anointed. And it just got better and better and better. And it's like, you know what? Variety. Sizzler. A salad bar, you know? I mean, it's cool. I don't know why we get it in our mind sometimes that it has to be a certain way. Because you know why it is? We come from a certain church. And we've always done it that way. You have to have a praise band. Well, now I found out that you don't have to have one. According to the Bible, it's group alternating with group. Or it's really any which way the Lord leads you and your fellowship. And what kind of people you have in your church. So we've seen so much good come out of this. Verse 27, now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem. All right. So the walls are erected. It was a record 52 days. It was amazing in the midst of all that opposition. And now they want to have a dedication. And I say, why not? You know, when something great happens in your life, why not celebrate? That's how I feel. Just live long enough to see a lot of sorrow in the world, a lot of hurt, a lot of disappointment. So why not rejoice and celebrate when something good happens, man? You come to a certain hallmark in your life, celebrate. You're going to have enough trials and tribulations, man. Celebrate. Have a good time. Rejoice in the Lord. Give thanks to Him. Put the pics on Facebook so we all can see. You know? And so here they are. They're dedicating the wall of Jerusalem. And they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness. See that? Gladness. Both with thanksgivings and singing with cymbals and stringed instruments and harps. So music to glorify the Lord. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the countryside around Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophathites, from the house of Gilgal, and from the fields of Geba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built themselves villages all around Jerusalem. That's cool. Then the priests and Levites purified themselves and purified the people, the gates, and the wall. So I brought the leaders of Judah up on the wall. And this is this is our concentration this morning, but I just love it. I just underline that up on the wall. Because what happened in chapter 4, verse 3 of Nehemiah? There was that dude, Tobiah, remember him, who said, if even a fox goes on that wall you guys are rebuilding, it's going to fall down. Remember our study on foxes? Average weight of a fox, 14 pounds. What a slight that was. What a mockery. And now they're going up on the walls. And Nehemiah just has this really cool thought. The walls, man. Remember that guy Tobiah that criticized us? Let's go up on the wall. Let's not walk around them. We're going to walk on them. I'll show you. It can hold more than a fox or two. It's going to hold 2 Thanksgiving choirs, one that goes this way and one that goes that way. And they're going to be blowing trumpets, all to the glory of God. And so they appointed 2 large Thanksgiving choirs. One went to the right hand on the wall toward the refuse gate. After them went, and it just mentions all the people in that particular choir walking that direction, 35, and some of the priests' sons with trumpets. And so they're celebrating. And then down in the middle of 36, with the musical instruments of David, the man of God. So they had other instruments. David was a musician, King David, and he also invented instruments. Ezra, the scribe, went before them by the fountain gate in front of them. They went up the stairs of the city of David, so they had stairs to go up on top of there, on the stairway of the wall, beyond the house of David as far as the water gate eastward. The other Thanksgiving choir went the opposite way, and I was behind them. So Nehemiah had to choose one choir, so he chose that second one and went that way. With half of the people on the wall going past the Tower of the Ovens as far as the broad wall and above the gates of Ephraim, above the old gate, above the fish gate, the Tower of Hananel, the Tower of the 100 as far as the sheep gate, and they stopped by the gate of the prison. And so within the walls around Jerusalem, there were all these gates, of course, to gain access to north, south, east, and west. Not just 4, but there were many gates. And then it just goes on, the end of verse 42, the singers sang loudly with Jezahiah, the director. I like that. They sang loudly, or they made their voice to be heard. Also that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and the children also rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard afar off. So you have the family worshiping together. I love that. That's what I love to see, is families come rolling in on Sunday morning, and minivans and SUVs and little sedans and baby buggies coming out of the trunk and all kinds of things. And, they're just coming in as families and rejoicing. It's just the greatest thing when you go to church together and have the kids come. And I love the kids when they pop out of Sunday school. Look what I made, And they're just so happy, they go home and put it on the fridge or somewhere at home, and they're just thinking about Jesus all week long because of those faithful Sunday school teachers. And I love it. It says, the joy of Jerusalem was heard afar off. Just something about that. Just the whole rejoicing of people together in a big crowd. I mean, it really excites me. I remember as a kid growing up in the shadow of Angel Stadium, okay? Anaheim boy. And, just going to the Angel game was so cool. And I would be so thrilled when there would be a home run. And they still had the A was different back then, before they remodeled it for the Rams, and then they remodeled it again, and made it smaller. I miss my Rams. And but the A, whenever there was a home run, the light would go up, and then go around the halo. It was so cool as a kid. I just remember that. But I remember one time I just wanted a hot dog so bad. And those things were like long. I thought they were better than the Dodger dogs. Okay, sorry, Vin Scully. But the nice long angel dog. And one time I was just going, my dad gave me some money. And so I went up there. You know how expensive it is. It's like, oh, but my dad was in a good mood. And next thing you know, there's a home run, and I missed it. But the roar of the crowd was so thrilling. I was like, my hot dog. I missed it. You know, I just couldn't wait to get back out, you know, and all the mustard's fallen and everything. And it was like, wow, the excitement, the roar of the crowd. It says that they heard the rejoicing of Jerusalem afar off. I love it, because it reminds me of heaven, what heaven's going to be like. I love a good party, don't you? Do you love a good party? You know, people together rejoicing and celebrate after a good thing. And the best thing is God's love, isn't it? That's what heaven's going to be like. Just a constant celebration. I don't know where they get these old pictures of, you know, heaven being like a library. Shh. You know? It's just not right. So they were rejoicing. In verse 44, at the same time, some were appointed over the rooms of the storehouse for the offerings. And so they had accountability there for things material, financial. At the end of 44, Judah rejoiced over the priests, the Levites who ministered. That's always cool when you feel like, you know, you can do that you enjoy your spiritual leaders. And then 45, both the singers and the gatekeepers kept the charge of their God and the charge of the purification according to the command of David and Solomon his son. For in the days of David and Asaph of old, there were chiefs of the singers and songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. So there were worship leaders over the different groups. In the days of Zerubbabel and in the days of Nehemiah, all Israel gave the portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, a portion for each day. So look at how music was so important in the Old Testament worship. And how much more even now in New Testament days. Love it. The praise music that goes up. And I've got God on my pod. Yeah, I do. He's all over that pod, the iPod. So I got it going on. Not just at church, but man, first thing this morning, I had it going. And it was so cool. What a great way to start the day. Go vertical. All Israel gave the portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, a portion for each day. They also consecrated holy things for the Levites, and the Levites consecrated them for the children of Aaron. Now, our last chapter here, 13. Interesting chapter. On that day, they read from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people. And in it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever come into the assembly of God, because they had not met the children of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So they're back in the Word again. This was our concentration last week. Chapter 8 especially. Ezra. They asked Ezra to bring the law of the Lord and to read it, and they read it from morning until midday, and the joy of the Lord was their strength. And now they're reading from the book of Moses again. And Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, what we call the Pentateuch. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now they found something in the Bible that was interesting to them. No Ammonite or Moabite should ever come into the assembly of God. Now those were neighbors of Israel. And remember how Israel's here and Egypt's here. And you remember that they came up out of Egypt, but instead of going right into the promised land, they wandered around in the wilderness for how many years? 40. So now they're coming up on the other side. They're going to come in this way, on the east side. But they have to go through Ammon and Moab, 2 countries, the Ammonites and the Moabites. And so they said, you guys, can we walk through? And they said, no. No. Like, we're 3 million people. We won't drink your water. We won't do anything. We won't even pick an orange, a pomegranate. And they said, no. So they had to go this long route around. It was such a hassle. And so it says in the law of Moses that these guys shouldn't ever come into the assembly of God because they didn't meet the children of Israel with bread and water, but they hired Balaam. Remember him? Balaam. How could we forget him? In the book of Numbers, we see that he was a guy that was hired to curse Israel, but he ended up blessing Israel. What else happened? Kind of something kooky. The donkey, remember? How he beat the donkey, and the donkey said, "What's up with that?" Modern interpretation. And he goes, because, I told you to go and you didn't. And he goes, it was a she, wasn't it? It actually says it was a she. Have I ever been bad to you? No, you've been a good donkey, but you're stubborn, And Balaam looks and goes, oh, man, the donkey was smarter than me because the donkey sees the angel of the Lord with a sword saying, don't come this way. And so the donkey went flat like that. Balaam's sitting on, hitting the donkey and talking to the donkey, and the donkey talking to him. Crazy. So it says, however, our God turned the curse into a blessing because when he went up on the mountain, curses didn't come out of his mouth, but blessings. So it was when they heard the law that they separated all the mixed multitude from Israel. So it's just what happens when you read the Bible. You find things, and it's like, you know what? Wow, I've never seen that before. And you want to obey it. Obey the word. Be a doer of the word. Now, before this, Eliashib, the priest, having authority over the storerooms of the house of our God, was allied with Tobiah. And you go, wait a minute. Here's this priest, man. The chief priest. And he's allied with Tobiah. We know Tobiah. He's the bad pirate in the story, isn't he? Yeah, he is. He's the one that said, if even a fox goes up on the walls, it's going to break down. So, why is he being so chummy with him? He prepared room for him, a large room, where previously they had stored the grain offerings, the frankincense, the articles, the tithes of grain, the new wine and oil, which were commanded to be given to the Levites and singers and gatekeepers and the offerings for the priests. But during all this, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Remember how he said he would just go for a time. Then after certain days, I obtained leave from the king. So he came back to Jerusalem. I came to Jerusalem and discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah in preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me bitterly. Therefore, I threw all the household goods of Tobiah out of the room. Reminds me of Thursday night study when Jesus cleaned the temple. Nehemiah comes back and goes, What? What are you guys doing? Eliashib, you know better. You're the chief priest, man. What did you do? You moved the things of God out of the storehouse, and you just brought Tobiah in and gave him a little condo there, right there in the temple precincts. Why are you so chummy with him? Watch out, for that compromise. And so it grieved him bitterly. And just picture Nehemiah just throwing stuff out. Just tossing stuff out. Get stop here and everything else. Bring the stuff of the Lord back in, and kick this guy out. He shouldn't be in here. And so Nehemiah is righting the wrong. And this is what he's doing all throughout his book. He's righting the wrong. He is the picture of a great leader. If you want to study about leadership, read the book of Nehemiah. Then I commanded them to cleanse the rooms, and I brought back into them the articles of the house of God with the grain offering and the frankincense. So, good job, Nehemiah. Verse 10, I also realized that the portions for the priests had not been given them, for each of the Levites and the singers who did the work had gone back to his field. So The Bible says that, these priests should have been supported by the tithes and the offerings, but it wasn't happening. So I contended with the rulers and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" And I gathered them together and set them in their place. There he is again. I wouldn't want to tango with Nehemiah here. Then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain and the new wine and the oil to the storehouse. So you see the tendency to knock off tithes and offerings is there. It is. We know it is. And even as believers today, it can happen to us. And now Nehemiah is restoring this, and I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse of Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedai, and next to them was Hanan, the son of Zachar, the son of Mattaniah, for they were considered faithful, and their task was to distribute to their brethren. So, some things kind of got weird when Nehemiah was away. And so there's a couple ways you can look at it. It's like, what's wrong? I go away, everything falls apart. Or it could be this. You know what? I'm a leader. I have an important role. I am dispensable, and I am replaceable. But God has called me to be a leader. And of course, things would kind of go wacky, because sheep need to be shepherded. And Nehemiah was gone a long time. You ever had that happen where you had a responsibility and you came back to it? It was like, man, hello, what happened here? And you had to spend some time kind of putting things back together again. Well, maybe they should have done a better job in leadership. But remember, God's called you to leadership. And it's a blessing, and it's a privilege to, go in there and to be a leader and to do what God has called us to do. Verse 14, remember me, O my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for its services. So he's not asking people to remember him. He's asking God to remember him. And God will always remember us in everything we do for the Lord. You guys probably know the scripture, Hebrews 6:10. God is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love, which you have shown toward his name, in that you have ministered to the saints and do minister. Everything you do for the Lord, God sees. We don't do it as unto man, do we? Remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, Sermon on the Mount? When you serve, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Don't do it, or else you'll lose your reward. God, who sees in secret what you're doing, will reward you openly. Now, I had a brother in the Lord come to me this past week, and he goes, Pastor Louie, I was watching this telethon thing on TV, one of these Christian stations. And there was a big name guy. And he said his name to me, but I won't tell you because we're not to speak against our brethren. Just keep to the general principle here. And he said this guy was exhorting the TV audience to give now. Come on, this is a Christian station, and they rely upon the pledges of the people. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, that's God's people giving, and these stations are leading people to Christ, doing a lot of good, a lot of wacko stuff. But what do we say? Eat the chicken, spit out the bones, right? That's what we have to do sometimes with these kinds of things. But the guy, this well-known evangelist guy, said, right now, to the leader of the station, I'm going to write out a check for $10,000. And I want this to be an example to all of you listening, to give to this station, to these people. And he wrote it out and he walked up to the leader on TV and gave it to him. So this brother says, Pastor Louie, was that right or wrong? I mean, I'm just, doesn't the Bible say? And he quoted Matthew 6. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. When you give, you don't parade it. God who sees in secret will reward you openly. And so, we give. It's kind of like the other day when we got a FedEx. And you know how they ring sometimes? I don't get it. Sometimes they're there and they make you sign. Other times, like, I open up the doors like, huh? It's a package down there. And I looked out. This guy or this gal is fast. Yeah, I don't know if it was like, a long poker from the van, and they frisbee it, to my front door. I don't know. But I was like, that's the way we're to give, right? Instead of saying, sign here. Did you see me? I gave $10,000, So I said, yeah, brother, God rewards us, and that's all that matters here. Now, 15, in those days I saw people in Judah treading wine presses on the Sabbath. And the Bible says to rest on the Sabbath, right? As far as the Old Testament. It's even one of the commandments. And bringing in sheaves and loading donkeys with wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them about the day on which they were selling provisions. Men of Tyre dwelt there also, who brought in fish, and they, of course, they're right by the Mediterranean Sea and neighbors of Israel. It probably would have been a real cool thing, to have fresh fish, and all kinds of goods, and sold them on the Sabbath to the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. So here's a violation of the commandment. So watch Nehemiah, man. Here's leadership again. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah and said to them, what evil thing is this that you do by which you profane the Sabbath day? Did not our fathers do this? And did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So one of the reasons why God displaced Israel in the first place was not only because of their worship of idols, but they didn't respect the Sabbath. And God said, you owe me. It's 70 years. 70 years you guys are going to be in exile in Babylon. And so Nehemiah is saying, you guys, this sin is huge. This affected us in the past. Why are we repeating this very violation of God that got us in trouble in the first time? But we do that, don't we? We default back to our old sins. Usually Satan doesn't have to go say, like, here's something new. Where do we usually go? To the old sins, don't we? Right? It's like that computer default button. You ever, have your computer get messed up and someone tells you, oh, just press the default settings. Like when you first got your computer. Just press that button. Press. And you go back to those original settings. And Satan says, just press the button. And he doesn't have to give us something new. It seems to always be the old things for the most part, right? So it was at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut. See, he got involved. Instead of complaining, I hate being a leader. I can't believe this. He just said, God's called me to this. I'm constantly putting out fires. Isn't that what we do a lot in life? Put out fires. Yeah, we do. As parents, we put out a lot of fires. In our jobs, we put out a lot of fires. Instead of just saying, oh, I can't believe, why isn't everything going smooth? Hey, thank God that we have our jobs. Thank God that God gives us solutions and so forth. We just get involved. And God shows us what to do. I commanded the gates to be shut and charged that they must not be open till after the Sabbath. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. So God gave him wisdom. James 1:5 says that God gives us wisdom when we need it. So we seek him always for all the big and little decisions that we have to make, and we just keep seeking the Lord until he shows us what to do, and he always, always, always shows us what to do. Now, the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. Then I warned them, can you picture them? And said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? They were testing Nehemiah, little varmints. If you do so again, he says, I will lay hands on you, and that's not to pray for them. Lay hands. I'm just going to throw you out of here, man. You and your fish back to Tyre. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath. They saw that Nehemiah was a firm leader. And people will test our leadership to see how much they can kind of wiggle and niggle, us. And when we don't budge, it's like, well, that didn't work, see? And then they just kind of go away. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and that they should go and guard the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of your mercy. So don't let the people see me, Lord, but I know that you will remember me and all that I do for you. That's all that matters. Amen, brothers and sisters? It's all that matters. Or else you can be really bitter because you do things for people and they don't say thank you. They take you for granted. And we serve the Lord, don't we? We don't do it for folks or strokes. We do it for Jesus. And that way we don't get bitter at people. It's like, oh, they didn't thank me. They didn't do this or that. And I remember discussing with my daughter, Lindsay, when she was cutting hair, before she moved to Sweden. And that was her job. And people would stiff her. I don't know if you guys have ever been waiters or waitresses or in some arena of the workforce where you got tips. And the worst thing is to get stiffed. You work so hard, right? And they sneak out without giving a tip. It's like, oh, man. And she could see him coming. They're arguing over this expired coupon of 5 years ago. She just knew. She just knew she was going to get stiffed. And I said, Lindsay, you know what? God's going to bless you because some guy's going to walk in with a little, one-step easy haircut, and he's going to give you like $20 as a tip because he just got a raise at work or something. He's going to be in a good mood. And sure enough, that's what would happen. Some guy came in, just would give her like $20. She's like, what? He didn't even use a coupon. And wow. What am I trying to say? It all balances out. You don't have to worry. When you're ripped off in one area, don't worry about it. God's going to bless you in another area. When something's taken away on one side, God's going to augment and increase on another side. It always all equals out in the Lord. So Nehemiah is looking to the Lord, not to man. And it's so cool because God is the one who prospers. 23, in those days I also saw Jews who had married women to Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. And this was the problem back in Ezra. Remember that? And Ezra got so upset. Remember how he cried? Remember he sat down and didn't eat? And he fasted? And he just was so frustrated that, what did he do? He pulled out his hair and his beard. And he said, you guys, we have to make this right. And the people felt so bad that they actually put away their foreign wives. Now it's happening again. There's a 13-year gap between Ezra and Nehemiah. So it's this repeated sin of compromise and being unequally yoked together with non-believers. And it's the perpetual sin in the church as well. You just see it. And we tell singles, don't be unequally yoked together. Have your standards really high when you're dating. Whether you're young or you're older and, something happened and you want to be remarried or whatever, man, careful out there. There's sharks out there. And female sharks, too. And watch out. And don't be unequally yoked together with non-believers. They say they're a Christian. That doesn't mean a thing. Well, I use the Christian services. That doesn't mean a thing either. Have you prayed about it? Don't be so desperate. Well, they say they're a Christian. I'm just so lonely on Saturday night. I just want to go out. I haven't worn this dress forever. And it's like, oh, spare me. Come on. No, they married these non-believers, and half of their children, see, here's the problem, spoke the language of Ashdod and could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke according to the language of one or the other people. Listen, you guys, even non-Christians tell you not to marry another religion. Have you heard them? I've heard them. They'll tell you, don't marry another religion or denomination because it doesn't work. It does not work. And this is from the mouth of non-believers. Why? Because your kids, you're a Christian, and you're so desperate you want to marry a non-believer. Watch out, man, because your kids are going to speak the language of the world. Because they're going to follow you, yeah, but they're also going to want to follow the other parent as well and their worldly ways. And they're going to speak the language of the world and not the things of the Lord. So I contended with them and cursed them. You might be saying, no, it's not what you think. It basically is that he's pronouncing them cursed. That you guys, if you continue in this, the curse of God will come upon you. So, of course, the Bible says, let nothing profane or evil come out of your mouth. So he's cursing them with the curse of God. And look at this, you guys. I would not advocate this, but he struck some of them. He hit them. No, I've never done that in the ministry, okay? I have been tempted to. We've had some jerks, you know. And he struck some of them, and he's pulled out their hair and made them swear by God, saying, you shall not give your daughters as wives to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons or yourselves. Hey, maybe I should change my technique, huh? No, I'm just teasing. Now, it's interesting because Ezra, that we just mentioned, he didn't pull out other people's hair. He pulled out his own hair and beard. Ouch! And you just think about that. Oh, man. Now, I used to have a mustache back in the 70s, okay? All right, when the 80s hit, it went off because it was like 80s. But I just remember kids and my niece and all, she would just take and pull it. Uncle Louie! My lip, you know, kind of thing. Ezra pulled out his own hair, but Nehemiah is pulling out other people's hair. You might just go, well, what's all that about? Different leadership styles. That's all I can say. You got to be you, and I've got to be me, you know? And that's the only spiritual principle I can find on this. But I think it's true. We're all different personalities. And so he just went ape on this, and he told him it was just so wrong. And then verse 26, he brought up about the past. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? And yet among many nations there was no king like him, who was beloved of his God. And God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, pagan women caused even him to sin. He liked the high heels, man. And how many wives did he have? 700, 300 concubines. Hello. Do you think he was addicted to women? And what did the women do? They actually pulled him away from the Lord. See? The foreign wives, see what happens is